Hey folks, I'm Jack Fossett, and we are going to shoot out 5 overdrive pedals today in the context of which one works best for the Fender Hot Rod Deluxe. We're going to get started in a minute here with single coils, talk about each pedal a little bit individually, then try them out with humbuckers, and stay tuned to the very end. I am going to tell you which one is my personal favorite and my recommendation. Folks, if you like what I'm doing on the channel, follow the link below where you can buy a CD or download a song. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, so that's the selection we're working with. Now, why did I pick these 5 pedals? The reason is because they are either actually are or represent 5 classic overdrive circuits. So we're going to start with number 1, which I have right here. This is the classic Ibanez TS808 Tube Screamer. This is a great pairing for most Fender amps. This kind of harkens back to the classic Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of sound, Tube Screamer with a clean Fender amp. It's the epitome of blues in a lot of ways. It's a great tone that really suits the Fender. It kind of gives the mid-range boost in frequencies where Fender amps have a little bit of a scoop, and it fills it out nicely so that mid-range kind of gets more present but without getting overpowering. Great with single coils, works great with humbuckers too. Kind of suits the single coils best in my opinion. But this one's a great pedal, and I again went with the classic. This is the same kind of TS808 that you would buy right off the shelf. No mods to it or anything. And a lot of Tube Screamers are really going to be a solid choice for this amplifier, whether you're talking about an 808, a TS9, or any of the thousands of clones or inspired by pedals that are out there. Next up, we have the Boss Super Overdrive SD1. Again, kind of classic circuit. This is the modern one. I feel like this one is the most tube-like in a lot of ways. It kind of has, it has a fatness to it that's different than the Tube Screamer. It has a punch to it that's different than the Tube Screamer, and it boosts it in a way that I feel like is very kind of tube-like and natural. That's not necessarily to say that it's transparent though, as it does kind of have its own sound. One of the great things about the Boss pedals too is they're sturdy, they're reliable, they are classic in their own right. You know, for a while there when I started playing guitar, Boss were kind of, you know, looked down upon because there were other companies popping up around and things, and then of course that really took off after YouTube, when people like me could start doing video demos and small companies could kind of get their voice heard a little bit more. And from what I saw, Boss had been kind of snooted at for a while because they were the big name brand. You know, they were kind of, I hate to use this word, but they were almost like the generic pedal. And nowadays I feel like they're getting more of the classic credit that they're due, because there are other companies that are coming out and making a lot of mass-produced cheap stuff. I mean, if you look at it, like Amazon has a line of pedals now and everything. And so seeing Boss get the credit that they're due is really nice. That's a nice kind of silver lining to the fact that there are all these other cheap kind of repros coming out and everything. But because Boss is a great company who's made great stuff, and they've been pioneers in a lot of ways. So it's nice to see Boss getting some of the credit they deserve. And this one works. This one works well. This is a classic solid overdrive that I think is a fair choice. And one of the cool things about, you know, it being a bigger company is if you're somebody who's on the road, you can get these anywhere, and that is actually pretty helpful, because if you use a fancy boutique overdrive and you're out on the road and something happens to it, if you don't have a backup, you need to get something from a local store or whatnot. They may not have something, and that could affect your tone. And you know, part of that's playing out and, you know, being a professional musician or, you know, a touring musician. But if you have something that can be easily replicated, that can be easily replaced, that's not a bad thing. Next up, I am using the Wampler Tumnus Deluxe. Now, this is my selection for a K-inspired classic mythical overdrive pedal. This is one of my favorite overdrives. I love this. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife of tone. Now, I'm actually not using this in the way that I generally would use this pedal, and the reason being is because I have it set, according to the Wampler manual, relatively close to what they call the classic KTR tone, but with the gain pushed a little bit, because I do want it to represent this circuit, and this one does a lot more than just the classic K circuit. With its 3-band EQ, it's got a normal and a hot switch, so there's a, you know, I could do a whole video of just how to dial this one in, on how to get it to sound great with a Hot Rod Deluxe. But for the purposes of the video and for the purposes of trying to show you the kind of the classic circuits, I am going to keep it on classic KTR mode. It's great if you like the sound of the amp, and again, it's that kind of whole transparent thing, but they do have their own character in a lot of ways too. But this one is a great option, this particular pedal in general. Again, I love the Tumnus Deluxe. And again, you know, without getting into it in the video, just in the interest of time, the 3-band EQ, you could do a lot with this particular K-style pedal into the Hot Rod Deluxe, and it would be a great choice. Other K-style pedals out there, you know, one of the inexpensive classics would be the Electro Harmonix Soul Food. There's a lot of other pedals in this style that will give you a really cool rocking sound out of a Hot Rod Deluxe. Next up, we have the Snouse BlackBox Overdrive 2. Now, this is my selection for a blues breaker style pedal, and the blues breaker style pedal, based on the Marshall pedals from several decades ago that were pretty short-lived but became modern classics. I believe John Mayer used one of the classic blues breakers, and then everybody kind of wanted one after that. This is an excellent reproduction of a blues breaker that does a lot more. Again, what I'm going to do is keep it in the blues breaker kind of sound. Snouse also makes a regular 3-knob, and there are a lot of other blues breaker style overdrives out there. There's the Analog Man Prince of Tone, there's the Wampler Pantheon, there's the Keeley 1962, there's the Vic Audio Mount Pleasant, and a lot of these pedals just, they work really well with Fender amps. They have their own character and they have a pretty even response. They're a lower to mid gain overdrive, but they do have their own character, so they don't push any wacky frequencies so much, but they do kind of they do have their own sound, but that blend works well with a Fender amp. Lastly, we have this little guy, and you may be wondering what this is. Well, this is a Smokin Amp Company pedal, and this is their clone of a Zen Drive, and so that's why I picked this one, because this is a pretty dedicated Zen Drive clone. The Zen Drive models the D-style amp sound, and in some ways has a likeness to a Tube Screamer, and in other ways has a likeness to the Blues Breaker, but this one gets a little bit more gain, and it has this really useful, he labeled it the X control here, it's called the voice control on some others, and of course you have volume, gain, and tone. This is a great pedal. The Zen Drive is kind of an underrated overdrive pedal in my opinion. There's a lot you can do with it as far as tone shaping. Really great pedals, and I do think that they suit Fender amps particularly well. So that's the selection that I have going into the Hot Rod Deluxe for today. Next, we're going to play it with humbucking guitars, and then again, stay tuned to the end, and I'm going to give you my personal recommendation. You're still here. Either that or you skip to the end. Patience is a virtue. I digress. So, this may not come to a surprise to those of you who follow me, but my personal favorite, my overdrive selection for the Hot Rod Deluxe and of what we're playing today is the Snouse BlackBox Overdrive 2. Now, these are hard to come by right now. There's a wait list, and there are not a ton of them used, probably because they're so good and people don't want to get rid of them. So I will say that while this one is exceptional in general, my favorite is to play a Hot Rod Deluxe with a Blues Breaker style overdrive. And in fact, for years, when I used to play around New England, my live rig was a limited edition Hot Rod Deluxe White Lightning, had this Alpine white Tolex with this sort of sparkled jet black grill cloth, and it had a Celestion speaker. And I played a Marshall BB2, the little tone bug one, the cheap one. I played those and a Stratocaster, and I used to get tons of compliments on my tone. Now that's a relatively inexpensive, common rig. It's, you know, a consumer level tube amp that's really designed for gigging. That Marshall pedal, the BB2, has never really been looked at with much reverence compared to the original Blues Breaker pedal. it just sounded great, and I thought the Blues Breaker worked great into it, and I've always felt that way, and I think this one is even better, and it works great into the Hot Rod Deluxe. So Blues Breaker would be my ideal style pedal. Again, whether you go with the Snouse if you have one, or if you can get one, whether you go with the Vic Audio Mount Pleasant, which is another great one. The Wampler Pantheon is really cool. That one, kind of like the KTR, does a lot of different tones. It's very, very tweakable. It does the cool Blues Breaker thing, but you can also get it to sound much more Marshall-y. The thing that I think about the Blues Breakers, people sort of mistake them as like trying to give you a Marshall sound. They're not a modeling pedal. It's not a model of the Marshall Blues Breaker amp. It's an overdrive pedal with its own sound, and so that's something that I feel like gets lost in translation sometimes by people. My second choice for this type of amp, yeah, part of me wants to say the Zen Drive, because the Zen Drive works really, really well for it. They're a little bit harder to come by, and they are a little bit more expensive. There's certainly clones and things out there like the Smokin Amp Company one. But so this would kind of be a tie. The other favorite of mine would be the classic Tube Screamer. The Tube Screamer and the Fender amp sound just works. Don't sneer at the Tube Screamer. It's a classic for a reason. It just works. It sounds great with Fender amps, particularly if you're using single coils. It fattens up your tone in just the right ways to kind of suit the single coils and the kind of slightly mid-scooped Fender amp sound. So these would be the ideal ones that I would go with: a Blues Breaker style pedal, a Tube Screamer style pedal. So let us know in the comments, what do you use? Do you use any of these circuits, or is there a whole different overdrive circuit out there that you think works best for this amplifier? I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.